Welcome back to the Caffeinated Librarians podcast with Simona.
Hello, everyone.
And me, Amanda. Hello. And today's topic, we're going to kind of dive more into the sci-fi genre of things. Now, the sci-fi genre has always been a rather obscure area. It's either one of those things that you've either really liked and you've had friends that have gotten you into it, or it's something you've either just never heard of, never really explored, and therefore you have this assumption that it's probably a lot of B tier, like B-rated movie stuff. And it usually alternates within the realm of stories that follow plot lines in alternate universes, either about terraforming planets, alien encounters, and more on the side of technological advanced societies that you would kind of picture in your dreams, like flying cars and teleportation, kind of like Star Trek teleportation there. But it also plays a lot with more on a psychological level, and it really talks about deeper. It kind of focuses more on the deeper questions of like what it means to be alive, you know, what it means to be human. It really delves deeper into more morals, and it's a really interesting genre that I don't think a lot of people truly appreciate today. And people probably are aware of movies such as like Blade Runner. There were recent films like Annihilation. There's a Star Wars franchise. There's the Amazon exclusive big show right now called The Expanse. Dune is getting a remake. I'm excited for Dune. There's Battlestar Galactica, Fifth Element, Interstellar, Artificial Intelligence, Ghost in the Shell, etc. There's so many sci-fi things that are so popular, yet there still are people out there who are kind of that steer away from books or movies that are still very popular.
I agree. My younger sister, she also works in a library, and whenever she's tried to recommend sci-fi or speculative fiction, she gets like that response, like not really interested. I think most people, at least her patron base, they want fiction, the New York Times bestsellers. That's what I think most people want to read.
They're more like, people are more interested, it seems like, and it might just be older or like more mature readers are more into like thrillers, crime dramas, and or like, you know, more happy things, more happy themes besides those things.
Yeah.
I don't want to think that people get happy on crime thrillers. That's a happy story.
I also think I somewhat get the same impression when you try to recommend graphic novels.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is this assumption that graphic novels are for children. So you think of like the Snoopy comics, Peanuts, and I think people don't realize that there's graphic novels for every age. There's graphic novels for every genre.
Oh, definitely.
So I think there probably is that, I'll use the term snobbery.
When it comes go ahead. No, that's how I feel. I didn't know if I want to use the word.
Yes,
but that's definitely
that's
the word.
what I'm gonna use. Like a kind of snobbery around like specific genres, specific formats. Like I remember I was recommending, there was this young girl, she had to read Hamlet or Macbeth, and she was having a very difficult time. So I suggested we have Shakespeare unabridged in graphic novel format.
Yes.
And you would have thought I was suggesting something like, you know, chop a finger off or like, and I'm like, no, I said, these are unabridged. I said, it's the play, the full play. I said, but there are images. The images will give context for the text. It will help. And the minute I said that, she was like, oh, okay. And she was willing to give it a shot then. You know, but I've had other parents say, like, I want my child reading. I'm like, well, graphic novels have text.
Well, it's
like,
funny.
Real
because,
books. I'm like, they're books.
I did a bunch of Shakespeare classes in college, and one of my teachers honestly said, I took a graphic novels course too. And she told us, she's like, Shakespeare, like in graphic novel form, is like one of the greatest things to come out, because what makes Shakespeare so difficult is reading it, because it wasn't written down at the time. or it was written down via the actors and the people who were in the play from their memory. So it's one of those things where it has to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
So doing it in graphic novel form makes it much more easier to see like the actions, the emotions, things like this. But then again, it's always artist interpretation.
Yeah.
But that's always neat about graphic novels as well, as to see what exactly their vision is for the whole thing.
And I also like sci-fi. I mean, I've seen quite a few sci-fi films. I haven't read too many sci-fi novels, but what I like about science fiction is that it allows you to explore these themes. You can get really creative and out there, but there's also like it's a safe space. Like nothing is off limits with sci-fi.
If you can explain it with science in some form, then it is part of science fiction. And I think popular to believe, I don't know if maybe people know this, but Frankenstein is considered one of the first science fiction novels. It's not it's a lot of people deem it as like a horror because of what it is, but it's actually a science fiction. So because she did try to explain some of there was a science at the time where people were doing that, and she took what was going on and turned it into her novel. But you can't bring people back to life, and that's where her fantastical vision comes into mind, and that's where science fiction is born from, is like you can do these things, but you have to explain why it kind of works and using actual things that are going on.
Yeah, it has to be grounded in some kind of reality or plot or plausibility or believability, or if that's even a word. If it's not, I just coined it.
And that's where like the steampunk genre also started to emerge. Was a lot of people were really into that a couple of years back, and I think they still are. But steampunk, although I think it's more of a lesser form because it's all like you're going back in time technically and using the technology of back then, the steam powered, and doing it now. But there's tons of stuff you can do with that, and I love the aesthetic of it all.
Yeah, definitely. So going, back to the series. So there were 7 episodes in total.
Oh, sorry, we didn't mention what was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
We're doing Love, Death, and Robots. This is season 2. I'm sorry. There are actually 8 episodes in total, and both seasons are available in Netflix. Now, my favorite episode was the episode Pop Squad.
Pop Squad was so much fun.
I loved the animation style, and essentially it's the 3rd episode in the series, and it's set. Oh, and FYI, there will be spoilers in this episode, so if you have not watched this series yet, don't listen. If you have, please continue to listen to us.
Before we move on with Pop Rock, I just want to let everybody know. So Love, Death, and Robots is an anthology series, a sci-fi anthology series. In the 80s, there was a sci-fi anthology series. It's a cult following on it called Heavy Metal, which also was a sci-fi anthology series. And this is not a reboot of that, but it is highly inspired by it, where a bunch of like indie animators and or studios got together and made shorts. Love, Death, and Robots has 2 seasons. Its first season ran for, I believe, like 15 episodes, 13, 15 episodes. I don't remember off the top of my head. Probably more, and I'm probably wrong. Season 2 had 8 episodes. All of which one of them it has to encompass all the themes, or at least one of the themes of love, death, or robots.
See, and I'm gonna bring that because that was my issue. Excuse me, with some of these episodes, because I assumed that the robot element would have to be present in each, so that kind of confused me because that's not the case.
I think that would be really difficult to do too if all you had to do was robots.
Yeah, so I probably obviously misunderstood, the overall, I guess, theme. But Pop Squad was my favorite. So it takes place in this futuristic dystopian world where reproduction has been outlawed due to overpopulation, and people essentially live expanded lifespans due to this miracle serum. So since people are living longer, the idea is, well, since we can extend life, there is no need to supplement life with reproduction. And, humans have caused enough problems as it is. We're going to outlaw reproduction. Now, there are people, I think they're called either reproducers or breeders. They're given that derogatory label, who have decided that having a child is worth it, that their lives are are long lived but not fulfilling because they're lacking in like that need to like nurture something. And there are these elite officers who are responsible for hunting down these breeders, disposing of them and disposing of their offspring. And essentially this world is divided into people who dwell in the slums, so they're like ground level almost, and people who are almost in these like high rise buildings that, you know, reach the sky. They're like extremely tall and very well off. So there's that division as well between the haves and the have-nots. And essentially the main character, whose name is Briggs, he comes back from a operation where he's disposed of these children, and this particular incident affects him probably more so than anything else. He's very old. I think he's 200 or 300 years old. But something about this particular mission strikes a chord with him, and he's unable to shake off the guilt of what he's done. And eventually, another interesting aspect of this world is that you have these antique shops, and what these antique shops sell are children's toys. Mm-hmm. So since there are no children, there are no need to make these toys. No one is buying these toys. So they're essentially novelty items. You have toy trains, you have stuffed teddy bears. And he goes into this shop and, you know, he sees this young woman who's very like sketchy. She's twitchy. You can see that she wants to quickly go in there and go out. And something about her behavior strikes him as odd, and he decides to follow her. And she essentially is a mother to a young girl. Who's this a toddler named Melanie. So he asks her, you know, why did you do it? You know, why did you break the law? Why did you bring someone else into this world? And she essentially says, you know, I'm very old. She's also very old. And my life has no meaning until she arrived and she fulfills me. And they get into this like scuffle, because the mother assumes that the officer is going to kill her daughter, but he doesn't. He spares both of them, walks outside, sees his colleague, who I think has also responded. I don't know exactly how they get the alerts in this world.
I'm not sure. I'm sure at some point they have some sort of, no idea.
Yeah, so
but I'm sure there's like a monitoring system in place.
I'm
also,
sure.
I'd like to point out that the woman's name is Eve.
Eve, yes.
And that's very fitting, considering she's one of the only people you know of, and she doesn't have a husband. Mm-hmm. He's dead, I think. Yeah. And so she has a child. So I think it's very fitting.
Exactly,
very fitting symbology there.
Yeah. For those who may not be familiar with the Eve that we're referring to the biblical Eve, who was the first woman that God created, and her partner was Adam, the first man. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so I agree. I didn't even realize, I completely forgot what the mother's name was.
I thought it was very fitting.
It definitely is.
Depends on your belief of history there, isn't it?
Yes.
History major, right?
Yes. If you subscribe to the biblical creation account, you know, Eve being the first woman, Adam being the first man, and every person coming from them.
Depends on which interpretation.
Exactly. So basically, Briggs exits the home. He sees his partner. He realizes what his partner's going to do, and he shoots his partner. And that's essentially how the episode ends. And what I loved about this episode was the theme that it addresses, in that you have this society which essentially has it all. You know, people have these extended lifespans.
They live forever. They live in the clouds. They have a beautiful life. They're rich. But except for the people on the earth.
Exactly, yeah. But you still also do have these people that are living on the fringes who, in spite of what they are sacrificing, they think it's a worthy sacrifice in order to have children. And it also, it reminded me of countries that have policies that limit the amount of children that you can have, the arguments on whether who is fit to have children, who should be allowed to have children, and also the extent that government is willing to go to basically control a population, to dictate this is how you should live your life. So I think that's also why I appreciated this episode the most. And also the animation is very beautiful. And the episode I liked the least, and then I'll let Amanda go, because I realize I've been talking too much.
No, you're good. No, keep going, girl.
Was the All Through the House. It reminded me.
I loved All Through the House.
It's like that outlier episode from Stranger Things with the like when Kali comes up and 11 finds out there's another girl with powers. It's like that episode that could have been its own show in itself. So All Through the House is a Christmas episode.
It's a beautiful Christmas episode. And everyone should play it during their holiday
Exactly. It's
mixes.
very warm and fuzzy. It'll really evoke those Christmassy feelings in you. So essentially, these two kids, brother and sister, Leah and Billy, are awoken from their sleep Christmas morning or Christmas Eve, whatever you want to call it, because they hear something and they realize that Santa has come. Ooh. So they sneak down, even though they know they're not supposed to. They duck behind the couch and they see this figure rummaging about, and all of a sudden there's this protuberant like tongue thing that shoots out, sucks up the milk that they've left behind, gobbles up all the cookies, and they realize that it's not Santa Claus, but it's too late. They've been discovered. So the figure emerges, and he really reminded me of No Face from Spirited Away, which is this animated cartoon, which if you're not familiar with it, go watch it. That's what I was reminded of. And basically this creature emerges, comes out. The brother and sister are terrified. They're like leaning against the wall, hugging each other. And then one by one, he says, so he goes, Leah. And then he like spits out a present.
He regurgitates presents, and it's just a nasty. He's just like hacking up
Yeah,
Christmas gifts, and they're just like terrified.
And he goes,
they're just like, "What is this thing?"
Yeah, and he says,
basically, I'd hate to see what happens to the children that he catches that are considered naughty, because the entire time he like looks at them and he sniffs them, and he's got these little. My favorite part about his design, the monster's design, was that I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Annihilation.
No.
There's this creature in Annihilation, and it is the most horrifying thing that still resonates in my mind, and it takes a lot to creep me out. But there's this thing that takes one of their friends and it imitates the voice, but when it walks through the house, it's nasty looking and it doesn't have eyes, and it just makes that raspy voice, and you're just like, I hate this thing. But this thing was kind of cute in its own way, in my opinion. It had these tiny hands that would put over its mouth, and I'm just like, oh. But it would try to sense if they were naughty or nice.
Yeah.
And if it was nice, it would regurgitate the present.
Yeah.
And if not, I don't know, because both these kids were good children.
I know. And then at the episode ends where like the brother and sister are back in bed, and the sister asks like, Billy, what do you think would have happened if we weren't good? And then like it pans out to the house, and you hear like the sleigh bells or whatever, and like the creature makes this like laugh or whatever. But you know, like I watched it. It was entertaining, but I couldn't figure out the love, death, and robots, because I naively assumed you have to have all three.
This one would have been death. This one would have encompassed death in some aspect, because you're kind of sitting there, and that's why I think sci-fi is interesting, is that it can have monsters like this.
But do you think this is
it's,
I guess if it comes from outer space, I guess.
It's written by most of the shorts in Love, Death, and Robots are all written by short story authors.
Okay.
So I forget who wrote this one, but he wrote a lot in the first and second season of this series. And I think this is one of his shorts. I think it more so just encompasses death. Okay. I mean, there's another one in here that's kind of like, how did this really fit into a sci-fi anthology?
Which one is it, Amanda?
The Dracula one. I said the Dracula one. So in the first season of Love, Death, and Robots, okay, there was one called, what was it? I think it was...
Because I was like, the Dracula one, did I like completely miss it? But it's the first season, right?
Yeah, it's called The Sucker of Souls. Okay. Now, if you are a vampire person like myself... Sucker of Souls is very interesting. It follows a man named Flynn. He's a mercenary and a doctor, an archaeologist. Sorry, not doctor, an archaeologist. And they're seen escaping through a tunnel, kind of fleeing some weird unknown thing. Moments before, the archaeologist's intern Simon discovers a cave with a bunch of like writing on it. And it describes a thing called the Eater of Souls. And then a demon suddenly appears and starts eating everybody, and it looks like a scene out of like Aliens when they're like shooting like the aliens are like get out of here and everything like that. And it like after it eats the intern, it like gets bigger and it gets more like animal like a bat kind of a thing. Flynn tries to save the doctor, and he tries to go find two of his other mercenary troop people who are in another area because they're trying to blow stuff up with C4. And on their way, they're confronted, and it's revealed that this creature is Dracula. And Dracula tries to kill all of them. But, Flynn does a pretty good job of, like, trying to keep it at bay. But you find out Dracula is actually afraid of cats. Does not like cats. And he explains that Dracula fears and hates cats, and because he has that knowledge. He's an archaeologist. He's read the books.
That's like the Mummy. In the Mummy,
exactly. He doesn't like cats. The reason they don't like cats there, it's interesting because there's like this mythology of cats being half in, half out.
Yeah,
they're on the verge of life and death, so it's like they are something to always be feared. But after all that, they reunite with the two people that were missing. They're stuck in a chamber. Dracula like shows up. They blow stuff up, and then he's killed in the explosion. And it's a good day for everybody, kind of, except Simon. He died. So it isn't solely sci-fi. I would say a majority of it, like 80% of Love, Death, and Robots, does encompass the sci-fi genre versus like some of them which are just kind of like just really out there. So I do want to put a disclaimer out for Love, Death, and Robots because it is an anthology series and it is a sci-fi anthology series. This is an adult sci-fi anthology series. There are butts everywhere. So it is not suitable for younger viewers. It does include sex, violence, drugs, alcohol, nudity, rape, and self-mutilation in its trigger warning. So there are these themes.
Oh my God, as soon as Amanda just listed those off, Lou, like his eyebrows raised up. He was like, what are we discussing?
But that is the kind of liberties you take. That's why I'm putting trigger warnings out right now for people who are not.
Yeah,
if you're going to go into an anthology series, they're all different stories taken from somebody else. So it's nice to know if there's something, but that one, the vampire, the Dracula one, is only violence in language. That's all you get.
And Netflix does a decent job of putting content warnings with their like shows or episodes. So yeah, so essentially the anthology series we're discussing is for adults because it has adult themes. You've been warned.
Adult themes in it. Another personal favorite is if you do go back to season 1.
Oh, okay.
And I will tell everyone that this is one of the most beautifully animated. This is not a CGI. This is more of it is computer because that's how animation is nowadays, but it is more on the side of like 2D animation versus the other ones. Anything else in this series is mainly 3-dimensional, called Good Hunting. For fans of mythology, you will really enjoy this one. So the plot goes like in the early 20th century of China, a young boy named Liang and his father track like shape-shifting fox-like creatures called hulijing. I am sorry if I butcher these kinds of names. But they basically are in the Japanese sense. I know that the term for that one is usually they're demon hunters. They're exorcists. They're demon hunters. They go to some rich guy's house who has apparently been bewitched by a fox maiden. And so they stay there, and the father tries to fight with one of these things and ends up ultimately losing track. And you find out that that fox woman had a child.
Of course.
And that was the reason she went back to the rich man. It was not because she had bewitched him, but because she had had a child with him. She didn't love him. I don't know. But then we won't know she's dead. Don't know. So I cannot pronounce the girl's name. I'm not going to try, as I feel I will butcher it.
This is a safe space, Amanda. Say the name.
Sao Jung. I'm gonna say that, but I'm probably very wrong, so please do not hate me. Sorry, the girl's name is Jan. There we go. That's much easier. Jan. No. Jan tries to explain to Liang that, you know, they live a very difficult life, as fox demons do. They're hated by everybody. They're hunted. She's poor. You know, she doesn't even have clothes. So, you know, they kind of live as beasts.
Naked?
They're naked. She's naked. So, Ling, kind of not understanding why he has to kill her, lets her go. Years later, Liang's father dies just before the British have colonized Hong Kong. So this takes place, although it's the 20th century, you're getting some of the feel of more, like, as it's saying, like the British colonization of China. So you're getting like buildings that are more like British buildings. You're getting more technology. You're getting stuff like that. So Liang moves to Hong Kong, where he works as a train engineer. He's really good at it. And one night he encounters Yan again, but she is now permanently human. Because in order to survive, she has had to take on her human form more. And in this world, you can get augmented. So to survive, she basically becomes a prostitute, as many women in that era had to do to survive. But she caught the eye of the governor of Hong Kong, who then drugged her and turned her into a cyborg. Like, had her body entirely made to be metal. She is basically holding on to whatever humanity she has left. And so...
That is just so sad.
Mm-hmm. This is a short called Good Hunting.
That is so sad.
But she eventually kills him.
Good on her.
Because she's tired of being this thing. So she goes to Liang in the middle of the night and asks him to build her a flexible metal body that will allow her to morph back into a fox, as she had once done. Because it is her part of her life, and it is part of her identity as what she is. And she lost that. So he does that for her, and it has one of the most gorgeous transformation scenes I have ever seen. There's this beautifully done where she's in the moonlight and you see like the metal like shining so vividly, and you see like the human leg turn into like the fox, like morph into it, and it's painful. But so is like, you know, changing in general is a very painful thing. But you know, I have this picture here of her like after she transforms into the fox, which is very, as I said, it doesn't quite capture the scene itself, but
that does look very beautiful.
It's incredibly beautiful. So then she becomes basically a vigilante who then slays people who have been... Ooh, you see it? You like it? It's pretty. She then becomes... Basically, she fights against prostitution. She fights against the unwanted advances of the British colonies and like the men who take advantage of women.
See, we stan women who take a negative situation, turn it into a pause, and then do something about it.
Yeah, yes. She kills people. So
she's goal-oriented, focused. That's what matters.
She's got it down. So I honestly recommend, if anybody's going to watch this, that is definitely one of the main ones to watch. Beautiful storytelling, great for 15 minutes. It's... Honestly, I love the story. I felt like there was a romance between her and Liang, but they never really went that deep into it. And I was just like, but she went to him because he was the only one that really showed her kindness. And he's good at what he does. So I was just like, it works out.
Yes.
Did you have any others that you liked? I didn't put down what I didn't like because I just didn't include it in my notes. So I was just like, okay. I'm not... Whatever.
Well, another one that I liked, and it was more for the animation. The story was pretty basic. It's snow in the desert.
Oh, I loved snow in the desert.
And it's once again in a futuristic world inhabited by humans and aliens. It's a vast world, a bleak desert. water thieves are locked in large glass containers and essentially left to die because water is a precious resource.
Always a precious resource.
Mm-hmm. And a man named Snow is on the run from this other man who has hired bounty hunters to hunt him down and extract some choice parts from him. And essentially, Snow is has a genetic anomaly that allows him to heal rapidly from severe industries. Oh my God.
From these severe industries.
Injuries. English. Okay, injuries. And there's one scene where, and it kind of, like, a lot of these movies reminded me of other movies, which is not to criticize the stories. It just shows, I think, that there was a lot of inspiration taken from various things. So
definitely, yes.
The whole scene where Snow is in this bar kind of reminded me of Han Solo when he's in the bar and the bounty hunters come in.
My friend doesn't like you.
So like they come, and at first he's trying to deny that he is Snow. He's like, oh, well, who is this Snow? He sounds like a great guy. But he's not really fooling anyone. Because also he has albinism, so that's another feature that makes him stand out.
In layman terms, he's albino, in case anybody doesn't understand that term.
Yes. So that also makes him stand out as well. So like the bounty hunters don't believe him. There's a scuffle. He loses a hand. He gets rescued by this woman named Geralda. And she basically says that she has been sent by, I'm assuming it's the government of this world or this intergalactic government to retrieve him.
She's an agent sent by what's called the Earth Central Intelligence.
Yeah. So the CIA, though, many, many years into the future. And she basically says that the people she represents also want him because they want to be able to understand why he has genes that essentially allow him to heal from anything. And you see that his hand is essentially growing back.
Yeah.
But
not like Deadpool gross little mini hand thing.
Yes, it is kind of gross. But and you also essentially learn that she's also not 100% human either. Long story short, they sort of develop a budding kind of friendship that blossoms potentially into this romance, and they decide we are going to avoid the government the government and the bounty hunters and live life to the fullest however long we can. And that's how it ends. So yeah, I like that for the animation. The other one that I liked, and I was really trying to understand what the overall theme was the episode The Drowned Giant.
I really liked that one. This one was also written by, I forget who the author was of this one, but it wasn't like it's a human trying to understand this thing. The story is there's a gigantic naked corpse of an unknown man, and he just washes up on shore like a beached whale. It's just a giant naked man on a beach. And so a bunch of like scientists, academics come to observe it, and they like stand on top of him, and he becomes basically like a tourist attraction where people start standing on him and walking around making fun of him. I'm not gonna lie, that was a really funny part. One guy's like, I'm like, get here.
They graffiti
one of the
him.
academics, it follows mainly one guy. His name's Steven. And he becomes so interested in the giant that he doesn't ever approach the giant. He kind of looks at it from far away. I would say he's more a philosopher. So using more philosophical themes and perspectives, he narrates the decomposition and the desecration of the corpse as time goes on. He also tries to... He's not very interested in the townspeople. He has a very, I would say, waning opinion of everybody. They could be just whatever. But eventually the people just kind of forget about the giant's existence over time too. And months later, the remains of the giant like appear in various parts of the town. So people just take like, it's basically a beached whale situation where you see a beached whale, you get interested, and you're like, whoa, how did this happen? What life did it live? What did it eat? I don't know. And you take your pictures and you are interested, but then your interest is kind of gone. And then once it starts decomposing, they took like piece of his bones and they put it like in the town as like little relics, or I think it's a tourist trap. They made a tourist trap out of this poor man. So I feel like I don't. Getting down to it, it sounds like it talks about the fleeting interests or the fleeting whatever. Basically, it's very good for, I guess, today's time too. You know, you see something online, you see something in person, you have your experience with it, and then it becomes nostalgia at the end of the day. You forget about it, and then years later you'll be like, you'll look at that dead giant skull and you'll be like, I remember when that happened. That was a nice time. I want to go there. And then you go there, you pay money to go there, and then gone. It's like it doesn't be the emotional value it has loses its time, loses its emotional value over time, is what I think kind of gets to it. And it kind of sucks because it's a human. He's a giant, but his physiology is the same as all the people there. And it kind of is this weird metaphor, I feel like, for life in a sense, is that we have all these fleeting moments, and that he tries to assign like humanity to the giant versus everybody else, which kind of just sees him as a thing.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that you've said regarding like how you're interpreting the movie. And I was also reminded, I recall recently, or fairly recently, there was news where this baby dolphin had beached itself. And all the beachgoers, they essentially killed the baby dolphin because instead of trying to return it to water, they were taking selfies with it. And the dolphin died. So it kind of reminds me also, what I found interesting was that no one questions the existence of the giant.
Except for Steven. Steven's the only one trying to.
More like the fact that this thing actually could exist. It's you have a giant essentially has washed up on your shore, and people are treating it as if, oh well, giants, they exist. Like I was almost thinking, like, what if a giant washed up on one of our beaches? How would people react to that?
Exactly.
But I was reminded of, like, when you said when carcasses of whales wash up, another thing that it sort of evoked was the whole carnival freak attraction, because there is this carnival that essentially takes the giant's penis and displays it in a tank.
Yes. Formaldehyde, keep it. That's what I was talking about. The guy like looks at it, he's like,
yeah.
You see these people like taking pictures, like a bunch of teenagers like, oh, get up here.
Yeah.
And they're having a good time. And then you just see one guy like that's taking pictures of it. And I'm like, stop that.
Yeah. So basically you think back to like the freak shows, and when I use the term freak, I'm using the term that would have been used at the time. I have no intention.
You're good. I feel like
yeah. So basically how these individuals with sort of genetic abnormalities became sideshow attractions, and that's essentially what this giant eventually becomes. You see one of maybe his femur bone is above a pub, in town. And you think about even like whaling and, whale bones and how they were turned into art pieces. It was like a trophy. Exactly. And that's essentially what some of his body parts become. They become trophies. And the only person, as you mentioned, who is actually trying to understand that this is a living creature. It's not, was a living creature, that he probably had a family, had interests. He's the only one. Steven's the only one.
Here?
Exactly, is actually doing this. Everyone else is treating him like a sideshow attraction. Exactly. They even desecrate his corpse. They graffiti the corpse.
They do. It was so weird seeing graffiti. It was like tattoos, but it's not a tattoo.
Yeah.
It was very interesting.
So, yeah, so I guess you could speculate what the creator of this particular piece was trying to say, or even about our modern society as a whole, and, everyone taking selfies with it. And you also be amazed what you see people taking selfies with, like someone could be like in the middle of like a car accident, and I've seen people taking selfies, or even people who pretend to be part of these big social movements. Like you had social media influencers during the Black Lives Matter riots or protests that were taking pictures pretending to be a part of it, but it was just for like social media likes.
Like, clout.
Yeah, so that could also be a commentary on the current state of our society and social media in general. But yeah, that was another one of my favorite episodes.
On a lighter note, I'm going to touch upon a more light, levity one. In season 1, there was, in the second episode, there's a short called 3 Robots. And as the name suggests, it takes place after the fall of humanity. 3 robots, KVRC, Xbox 4000, and 1145G. Those are the 3 robot names. They kind of wander through a post-apocalyptic city. It looks very much like the video game The Last of Us, like the first one. You know how everything's got grass still growing. You know, he's dead, whatever. And they're just trying to understand how humans lived based on their very limited knowledge of them and the things that they left behind. They learned the concept of human sports, consumption, and eventually like pets, because they do encounter cats. And the cats are not nice things, which the cats start to follow them. The 3 robots learn about their origins by coming across like older appliances like refrigerators and microwaves. Xbot, I think, is a descendant of the Xbox. And so seeing that is really funny. And they later arrive at what appears to be like a nuclear missile base. And 1145G explains that humans died out from an environmental disasters caused by their own actions. But KVRC states that at one point, humans genetically engineered their cats. And the cats, at that point, prove this by showing that they can talk. And they demand to be petted, while many other of the cats in the base corner like the 3 robots. And it's kind of funny because there's a scene with a basketball, and that gets me. And they're just... One of the robots, I think KVRC, is like a triangular. He looks like kind of like one of those little metronome machines that go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And it doesn't have hands. It has like a little whip thing that it like hits people with. Xbot 4000 looks like your stereotypical robot that has like the legs, arms. He talks. He's got it all. And 1145G is this little red robot that looks like a mini Baymax that just super tiny. He looks like he has it, and he's trying to explain everything. So there's a scene where they're like in an old school gym, and there's like a little basketball, and they're like, what do we do with this? And they're like, they used to like throw it or something. And so they just kind of stare at it, and they just try to, they're like, this is fun. Why was this entertaining to them? We don't understand. So it's 3 robots trying to understand humanity because they're gone, and they have no idea of anything other than maybe Wikipedia posts. So it's short, it's cute, and the cats at the end is voiced by someone, Chris Parnell, who does a lot of like cartoons here in the US, like Archer. He does Jerry and Rick and Morty, stuff like that. So him voicing the cat was even better. It's just like pet me.
Best television bit role in TV history.
Really?
In 30 Rock as Dr. Leo Spaceman. And Tracy Morgan calls him Leo Spaceman.
So essentially what that film tells us is nuclear weapons will be our downfall, or genetically engineered cats. So for those of you who believe your cat is trying to kill you.
There's also a book called
right.
Is My Cat Trying to Kill Me? Or like 100 Ways to Tell If Your Cat is Trying to Kill You, I think is an actual book too. Another one I will say that on a more serious note, and it's more one of the longer shorts, but I don't know if anybody's ever played like Mass Effect. Mm-hmm. So, you know, at the time, like the graphics were like amazing and it looks so real and you're like, yes. And even the new one, I think the graphics it looks really good, or at least a lot of the updated ones. So this kind of felt, I had a hard time with this one. It didn't seem animated to me when I watched it initially, and I could kind of tell via some movements it was animated. But it really took me like really looking at it to be like, this is animated. It was so realistic. So, and it's called Beyond the Aquila Rift. I'm sorry if I butcher that name too. There's a ship called the Blue Goose, and the space crew's crew members Tom, Susie, and Ray are returning home from a successful mission. But then an error in the plotting device causes a bunch of unexpected events to kind of occur. Tom awakes from suspended animation and is greeted by Greta, who is like kind of an old lover of his. She tells him that his crew are hundreds and thousands of light years away from Earth and nearly beyond what's called the Aquila Rift, and centuries have already passed. There is no way for them to get home either. And it's kind of sad there. And you're like, oh, darn it. And so he gets all freaked out. During the process of this, he also, his female crewmate, Susie, starts to kind of feel like things aren't right after meeting this woman. And she thinks that there's a problem, and that woman ends up like, you know, they end up sedating her and putting her back in like a sleep pod because she's going crazy. What are you talking about? There's nothing wrong here. You just can't go home. Stay here with me. To which, you know, Tom and Greta kind of rekindle that relationship. But Tom is still kind of in disbelief about the whole thing that's going on around them. He's starting to feel what Susie was feeling. He eventually demands the truth from like Greta, who's like crying, and she tells him that his experiences are all just a simulation, that he's not ready to see what reality truly looks like yet. So she's trying to protect him, and that's why she like cares about him. And she cares about all the other people that have been kind of suckered into this place. But he insists, so she awakens him. Tom is revealed to be an emaciated old man, and their ship is caught in this enormous web with countless other ships. His crew is either dead or trapped in their own trances because they're stuck in the pods and they're stuck in their simulations. And Greta is actually an alien spider-like creature at the web's center of the thing. She is gnarly, and I love it. Tom freaks out, and he loses his mind from the encounter, and Greta returns him to, like, the dream world, minus his... she basically deletes all that info. And she had with his crew and the others, and she awakens him and greets him all over again, and the process repeats over and over again. He relives the same thing over. It's very Lovecraftian in that sense, where he just loses his mind. And it's honestly fantastic storytelling. I didn't know where it was going. For a 15-minute short, really dark, really good. It's kind of what I expect from kind of the sci-fi genre, where it's like, is it a simulation? It's very Matrixy in that sense. Like, what's reality? What's real? And Descartes starts playing through my head. I'm like, are you real? Is this table real? I don't know. Is it a demon in my head? I don't know. I'd say that one was incredible. I'm more on a more mature episodes too. So it was fantastic though. That could be a full movie. I want that. So
did you notice when she's wearing the yellow dress and the whiskey, you could see her spider form through the whiskey?
No, I have to go back and watch that. That's so even cooler.
So basically, in whiskey lies truth. If you hold up like glasses of whiskey,
hey, a good whiskey can do wonders.
Reveals things. One episode that I like, which is definitely one of the lighter episodes of season 2, is automated customer service.
That was so funny.
And essentially, we are once again in a futuristic world where people, surprise, surprise, rely heavily on the service of automated machines. So literally, people do not even have to pay attention when they're driving. Like, there's a scene where this guy is asleep at the wheel. The car automatically stops. There's like a robot with a stop sign, and then he looks, and then the vehicle proceeds. People, like, there's no hairdressers. Everything is automated.
Yes, everything is automated.
It really reminded me of the Pixar film WALL-E, which if you haven't seen that film, please do. It's adorable.
And it still like holds up.
Exactly.
It still very much holds up.
Exactly. So the main character is this woman who lives with her dog. She has a neighbor that she's kind of iffy about. He seems a little strange.
His redneck ways.
Yeah, she's a little iffy about him. And she has her automated cleaner who basically decides that it's had enough of her and goes into kill mode. So, and there's a really touching, sad moment when it kills the fish. And I was like, why did the fish have to go? And then it tries to kill the dog.
The dog scenes are all great. I think it ends up shaving like the
exactly.
middle.
Exactly. But I like how the woman tries to get in touch with customer service. And what makes this movie so relatable is that we've all had to deal with customer service. Customer service where you're on the line for 40 minutes or more, where you can't understand what the person's saying, where the person is not really exactly helpful. So this is what this whole thing is about. She calls customer service, basically trying to let them know. And it has all these button options like, is your robot not working? Is your robot trying to kill you? Boop, like press 2. And she just, okay. To deactivate your robot, you must get close enough, throw something over it, and then press its button. So she's trying to distract it with laundry. So she throws the laundry basket at it. It says, fold now. And it's like, it says it's folding. She's desperately still trying to get in touch with customer service. And she gets angry, rightfully so. And the customer service agent basically says, well, attitude is not going to help you. In fact, if you have an attitude, you deserve to die. And that's probably why your robot wants to kill you. And at one point, it even suggests, do you have a pet or a family member that you can distract the robot with? So it says, look into your dog's cold, dead eyes. Does it really care about you? And there's a scene where she's like holding up her dog and she's seriously considering it. But then she realized, no, the dog is the only thing actually trying to help me. So she's not going to sacrifice her dog. And this is another great moment where the neighbor, because she can't get out of her house because everything is automated. So the neighbor goes, like, what does he say? Ladies. And you see, like, there's a dramatic moment where she turns, she's holding her dog, and they're staring at this guy. And he has, like, a shotgun. He goes, out of the way, ladies. And the dog gets, like, the puppy eyes for him. But before he can...
Here goes camera.
Well, we can still... Oh, well. One of our cameras has died.
That's one camera.
Well, we still got one more. So essentially, before he can fire, the automated robot shoots this like taser at the guy, electrocutes him, and he falls down. You think, oh, the guy has died. Guy hasn't died. And essentially, the guy, the woman, and the dog ride off into the sunset. And basically, every machine is out to get them because since they were able to kill the automated one, it sent a signal to every other robot. So they're riding off into the sunset. She throws out her earpiece and she and her neighbor and the dog ride off to hopefully a better future than the one that they currently are living in. So
that one was super funny. And to think it all started because like the robot was tidying up and it like moved, like I think it was a picture frame.
Exactly.
It was a picture frame of the dog because it's a champion show dog.
Yeah.
And he like straightened the picture and she was like tilted it because that's the way she wanted it. And the robot was like, no. And then she was just like, and that's when it became hostile.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
I've had enough.
And it's so funny because like people sort of, we laugh at this, but when you think about it, how we've literally developed refrigerators to tell us when our milk has spoiled. So you people laugh and say, yes, we have refrigerators that will tell you your milk has spoiled. Because expiration dates, opening up the milk carton, sniffing it are not sufficient, you know? We need cars to tell us, do you have children? Maybe you might want to watch out while you're backing out. I mean, I know stuff happens.
Oh, I do like those because I get so anxious.
But it's like, what happened to the day like when I was growing up where like my father said, on the grass, away from the driveway, and you stepped away from the driveway.
You had to like break your neck going backwards.
So I think a lot of the times we have sacrificed common sense for what we consider, what's the word I'm looking for? Like ease or even like convenience. Yes, thank you, Katie. Like where like you clap and your lights turn off because flipping a switch is too much exertion. So it's like, so these can be realities because in many ways it's like we need a wristwatch to tell us, have you exercised? Have you walked? Have you sat up from your couch at all today? You know, it's like, so we already have these things that are basically doing a lot of what should be common sense things. I mean, granted, there are, I'm not an anti-tech person. Like, don't get me wrong.
Don't be that person.
Exactly. I'm not that kind of person. But at the same time, I do see where there's that slippery slope where we could get to this world. Where no one drives anymore. They're sleeping at the wheel because the car drives for them.
Now there's automated cars. They're working on that, the cars from iRobot right now, where literally you can sit back, have a nap, and they're like, I'll let you know when we arrive at the destination. I'm just like, thanks,
How nice
car.
does that sound?
That does.
I know, until the car decides, I've had enough of you, locks everything, and drives you off a cliff.
And they say that cars are death machines. Cars are death machines.
That's never going to happen. What will happen is that the Russians will be able to hack into it eventually and cause mass panic.
That's when you learn Russian right off the bat. You're like, good. So
Love Vladimir Putin. What a great guy.
And that's what you whisper into the car speakers. I love him. No.
you just say
Say
one.
that loudly, and then you whisper. Because they're both listening.
The last one I think I'll highlight on this.
What about Ice Age?
Oh, you want to talk about Ice Age? Oh, I had some notes about Ice.
I was hoping you guys would.
Oh, I'll go for Ice Age. Why not? Let's talk about Ice Age. I had a note for that. I liked that one. That one was interesting. So, a couple have just moved into their house, or got a new refrigerator. I think they got a new refrigerator.
Speaking of refrigerators,
Gail and Rob find an antique refrigerator after they move into their new apartment, and they open the freezer to find that there are tiny preserved mammoths, and they are returning to the freezer, and they find like little Ice Age animals, that just mammoths and saber-toothed tiger, smilodons, and all sorts of stuff. But as they close the freezer and come back to it, they realize a fast-moving, time-dilated civilization is developing. So by the time
refrigerator,
in the freezer,
okay.
In the freezer. Within 10 minutes, the civilization goes from medieval era to industrial revolution and then to modern day. But some minutes later, they see the civilization use tactical nuclear warfare, which actually burns Rob's face. And they finding the fridge civilization escalating their warfare, they close the freezer and order a pizza. That's what they did, because they were trying to go in there to find some stuff, see if it's working and stuff like that. And they just decide to order a pizza and continue watching. After an hour, and afraid that nobody made it after the war, they open the freezer and find a civilization was rebuilt and has moved further into the future with technology evolving at an unprecedented level. So they have like utopia city, like that you would see, a metropolis going on there. They ultimately evolve into a race of energy beings, kind of like Stargate with the Ancients, where they become just balls of energy. And they return to a singularity and vanish from the freezer. And they think that's kind of the end of the whole thing. And believing that the mini people are gone, Rob unplugs the refrigerator to clean it in the morning. But then he finds out, as they are having breakfast, they find the freezer now has a prehistoric world with primitive sapiens under attack by dinosaurs. And it is super cute and weird to watch, like, be a bunch of people just watching, like, gods looking down on man become this thing. And you kind of wonder if we're ever going to get to that level, if we're ever going to be, like, energy beings. It is quirky. It is silly. I think the guy who wrote this short, I could be very mistaken, so if somebody wants to correct me, I don't have my notes about who wrote what. But it was the same person who did Self-Automated Service, if I'm not mistaken. He did a lot in this series, but Ice Age was one of those ones that definitely, after like a bunch of like really intense episodes in season 1, was kind of a nice relaxing one, because you're just watching two normal people be like, this is like a reality show. You're watching like an entire civilization like rise, fall, and then rise again, and then just vanish.
Do you have an idea of why he chose like a freezer?
No. It's just, if you think about freezers, they preserve things.
Yeah.
They kind of like, you freeze everything in a freezer, and life started, yes, on a hot, sticky mess. But I think a lot of our recollection of like humanity begins kind of around that time period. I think a lot of people have the representation of that humans kind of become humans in the Ice Age, is I think kind of the perception of that whole thing. You have like cavemen, and so when you think of like as a kid, you think the first humans like, oh, they're cavemen, and you see semblance of an actual like society forming. You build it, and that's when technology had its thing. You have fire, you have spears, you have hunter gathering, and it just kind of goes up, and then you have nuclear weapons, and then you go bam,
and then it starts all over again.
It makes a refrigerator very exciting to look at. I'm not gonna lie, although I think I'd get kind of upset because I hate the cold, so it's one of those things I had to open. I'm like, they were watching for a good while.
Anything about that episode that frustrated you?
Frustrated me?
I feel like Lou has a.
I don't know. What frustrated you? Is there something?
The fact that they put ice in red wine.
Oh, they're those people.
Yeah.
I know people that do that.
Up about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's not that
I don't
watching
drink wine often, but I don't put ice in it. When I do, I understand that there's a TikTok trend of trying to. There's a person I follow now that has like an Italian boyfriend. And she does things to purposely make him angry, and one of them was like the ice in the wine, and he was just like, "Why would you do that?" And I'm like, "Clearly, there's a trend going around." I know I believe my stepmother does that. Or she just puts fruits. She puts fruits in her. She makes this little sangria for herself.
I did that with my dad's beer because it wasn't cold. And so I felt bad. So I put ice in the cup and I put this beer in. And he was like, "While I appreciate it, you're not supposed to do that."
Why are you doing
and I'm
they
like,
have to water it down. That's
I was
what
like,
it's supposed to be.
Really? Oh, I was like, well.
My boyfriend's mother does that. Okay, that's who does it. She does it because she wants to water it down. And
Oh,
so
okay.
It's too strong.
So
So
like the decline.
So if something was like frustrating me, I didn't notice the wine. I was too busy focused on civilization in the freezer.
I know. I was like thinking like the decline and fall of a mini civilization was not what peeved people off. It was like she put ice in the wine. And I felt like saying, "This is why we're in trouble, people." Oh, I would feel so bad. Like, knowing me, I'd be like, I would never want to let that fridge to be unplugged, that fridge to ever be destroyed. I'd be like, because I'm killing people if I do that.
That would be a sideshow attraction because then civilization just keeps starting all over again in all the span of a day. And you're just like, oh my God, what's going on? I think there was a famous actor in that one too, if I'm not mistaken. I know he was in... I know everyone... Yes. I thought he was the guy from Spider-Man, when the one with like where he's Venom, Spider-Man 3. I think he was him. That was him.
He is in a Spider-Man, isn't he?
I think he's in that one. I think he's the one that turns into Venom in that one. And I was just like,
Yeah, that's the third
hey.
one, right? Yeah.
I will talk about the third one. Get off my back. I haven't seen it, believe it or not. It's on my list of ones to watch, but I keep seeing all this stuff, and I love Tom Hardy. You know, I've been waiting for like, I'm like, I know, I gotta get on it. I got things to catch up on. I gotta watch all these other movies. I gotta catch up on the Ava movie. I gotta. Is there any other ones that you wanted to talk about? Because I can.
It is after 2.
Yeah. No. Yeah, so like I never watched the first season, so I kind of feel bad that Amanda had to pick up the slack of the first and second discussing those, like, because I just thought I wouldn't have time. But yeah, so I guess how I'll end it is I think it's an anthology that's definitely worth a watch. If you appreciate sci-fi, I think you will appreciate these short films and the themes that they're addressing, or the questions that they'll sort of what they'll make you think about. I think they're worth watching. Also, the animation style is very nice. Like, there were some movies where I thought that there were actual people in there, like the Snow in the Desert.
Well, there was one in season 2 that actually had Michael B. Jordan in it as himself.
Yes, that is.
I have that one labeled.
That's the Hutch.
Yeah, the Hutch. He was actually in that one. There were actually actors in these things, but they were rigged. So they were in a CGI state.
Oh, okay.
But they were, I would say it's like, what is it, that deep fake thing where they put the faces kind of on something? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's scary stuff.
Yeah.
That's really scary stuff. If you haven't seen the John Oliver episode about that one, yeah.
So thank you again for joining us for this episode, and we really had a good time talking about this.
Yeah, and if anybody's out there and this has kind of inspired you to be like, kind of give science fiction and all of its kind of craziness a try, please look to your local library, because there's anthologies where they all have short stories, and majority of these, I said like good 80-90% of Love, Death, and Robots is all based on short stories that you can read. Please talk to your local librarian. Come talk to us. I know I looked up some anthologies, and so I can post that later. And yeah, please give sci-fi a chance. Sci-fi is incredibly good, especially if you are looking for something with deeper meaning. Darker themes, deeper meaning, noir, it covers it all.
Yes.
So
thank you, everyone.
Mm-hmm.